Imagine walking alone on a deserted boardwalk at night. The waves crash in the distance. The air smells of salt and damp wood, and every step of your shoes echoes louder than it should. Then, suddenly, you hear something else. A faint clink beneath the planks. A shadow that should not be there. A hand reaching out from the darkness to grab your ankle. Your heart races, your breath shortens, and you realize this place that felt so peaceful by day has become a nightmare by night. The boardwalk is no longer empty. It is watching you. Someone is waiting. Someone who knows you are alone. And once you step into their world, there may be no way back. Welcome to The Price Paid. Subscribe now, if you dare, because tonight we are diving into the chilling, true horror stories that unfolded on America's boardwalks. Stories of shadows lurking beneath the wood, strangers who never stop staring, locked doors hiding nightmares, and fires that burn more than just wood. Stay with me until the end, because the scariest part of these stories is not what happens, but the fact that they really did. The story begins in the quiet atmosphere of a small beach town, the kind of place that feels like two different worlds depending on the season. During summer, the boardwalk is alive with tourists, lights, and constant chatter. But once the season ends, silence swallows everything. Shops close, restaurants lock up, and the long wooden boardwalk turns into a ghostly skeleton stretching over the sand. For locals, this emptiness is both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that beauty can quickly turn into something unnerving when no one else is around. It was in this stillness that a 15-year-old runner found himself one late night, setting out on a jog he thought would be ordinary.
Are you sure it's
He had
working?
been part of his high school's varsity cross-country team and was obsessed with keeping in shape. Running was his ritual, his way of controlling the chaos of life. That night, with no music and only the slap of his sneakers against the planks, he zoned out into that strange runner's trance, where the body moves on autopilot and the mind floats somewhere else. The ocean roared in the background, steady and endless, and the smell of salt clung to the air. It felt strangely peaceful until the sound came. A metallic clink, so faint at first that he thought he imagined it, but when he checked his pocket, dread sank in. His house keys were gone. The panic was instant. His parents were strict about locking the house, and the keys had their home address etched onto them. Losing them was not just inconvenient, it meant handing a stranger access to his family's safety. He crouched on the boardwalk, peering into the darkness below, but the gap between the planks revealed only shadows. Without thinking, driven by adrenaline and pride, he jumped down into the sand and crawled under the boardwalk. The moment he entered, the smell hit him. Rotting seaweed mixed with stale alcohol, damp trash that had collected for months. Every breath felt heavier, and every step stirred up sand and garbage. He used the weak glow of his old digital watch as a guide, but it barely pierced the blackness. He searched, shifting sand with his hands, frustrated and angry. He considered giving up, but something inside him refused to leave his keys behind. He climbed back up, trying to figure out the exact spot they might have fallen. That was when he had what he thought was a brilliant idea. Untying one of his shoelaces, he dangled it through a crack between the planks so that it would hang below, a marker he could spot when crawling back underneath. But as he stood, the lace suddenly jerked out of his hands and slipped into the darkness. Something had pulled it. Not the wind, not his own movement. Something or someone was under the boardwalk with him. His blood turned cold. The realization hit. If someone had the shoelace, they probably had his keys too. Fear told him to run, but anger whispered louder. Someone had taken what belonged to him, and he wasn't about to let them walk away with it. Against every shred of common sense, he dropped back down and crawled under again. The atmosphere shifted immediately. The air seemed heavier, the silence more charged. He could hear faint movement ahead, then again from another direction. Shuffling sounds. Not one person, but more than one. His chest tightened as he swung the weak glow of his watch back and forth. But the shadows revealed nothing. Still, the noises grew closer, circling him like predators. That was the moment reality broke through his teenage confidence. What was he doing? Was he really about to fight people hiding under a boardwalk in the middle of the night? Fear flooded him, and he turned back toward the opening. But before he could escape, something icy gripped his ankle. Fingers dug into his skin, sharp nails scratching. He screamed, thrashing instinctively, kicking hard until his foot connected with something solid. The grip released. He scrambled on hands and knees, scraping himself on wood and sand, until he burst out into the open air. He didn't stop. He sprinted all the way home, lungs burning, vision blurring with tears and terror. When he reached the house, he pounded on the locked door until his father answered. His father's rage was immediate, furious at his carelessness. But when he saw the scratches on his son's ankle, anger gave way to fear. The police were called, and the locks were changed the next morning. For a few days, the house returned to a sense of fragile normalcy. It almost felt like a bad dream, a strange event that would fade with time. But then, one early morning, a knock rattled the front door. When the boy answered, no one was there. At first, he thought it was just kids messing around, but then he looked down. On the doormat lay a shoelace. His shoelace, the same one that had been ripped from his hands beneath the boardwalk. The family installed a security system that same day. They lived in fear for weeks, every sound in the night echoing too loudly, every creak of the floorboards setting their nerves on edge. But nothing else happened. The mysterious figures never returned, and the boy grew older, eventually leaving that house behind. Yet the memory never left him. The boardwalk, once a place of peace and routine, became forever tied to something dark. The image of hands reaching from below, the sound of shuffling feet in the shadows, and the shoelace left like a calling card of it haunted him. Even today, as he tells the story, he admits there was no rational explanation. What mattered most was the knowledge that, for at least one night, the boardwalk was not empty. Someone was there, watching, waiting. The boardwalk at night has a strange personality of its own. In the daytime, it belongs to families, joggers, bikers, and tourists who wander from shop to shop with dripping ice cream cones and sunburned shoulders. But when the sun drops, when the neon lights flicker off and the voices disappear, the same place transforms into something unfamiliar. It stretches out in eerie silence, the wood groaning faintly under the shifting sea breeze, the lamps humming with dim light that barely cuts through the fog. That silence can be peaceful, yes, but it can also feel like a trap. For one runner, it was exactly that, a quiet maze where he realized he was not alone. He had made a habit of running the boardwalk at night, relishing the emptiness and the sound of the ocean. It was his detox, his therapy, a way to clear the clutter from his mind. The rhythm of his sneakers against the boards matched the crashing of waves, and for a while, he felt like the last person in the world. But after a mile or so, the feeling shifted. A prickle at the back of his neck, a weight in his gut, the sense that unseen eyes were following him. He turned his head. At first it was nothing, just shadows, lamps, the endless stretch of wood. And then he saw him, a man, far down the boardwalk, standing still, watching, not walking, not moving, simply standing as if carved from the shadows themselves. The runner swallowed, told himself it was nothing, just another late-night wanderer. But when he turned back, the unease lingered. He ran faster, trying to outrun the feeling. Minutes later, he could not resist. He turned again. The man was closer now, still not moving, still standing, still watching. Fear spread slowly, like ice seeping into his veins. He pulled out the single earbud he had been listening to, leaving the world in silence, except for his heartbeat pounding in his ears. His pace quickened. Every slap of his shoes echoed louder. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Not steady footsteps like his own, but timed to mimic his rhythm, like someone walking in sync with him. He spun his head back. The man was even closer. His hood was pulled up, concealing most of his face, but the posture was unmistakable. He wasn't just standing. He was waiting. Panic bloomed. The runner broke into a sprint, lungs burning as adrenaline pushed him harder than he had ever run in practice. The boardwalk, usually his sanctuary, felt endless now, stretching like a cruel game. He knew where his car was parked at the very end by the beach entrance. All he had to do was reach it. The thought repeated in his head like a mantra. Just reach the car. Just reach the car. But every time he looked back, the man seemed closer still. He couldn't explain it. There was no sound of running, no blur of motion, yet the distance shrank each time. How could he be moving so fast without moving at all? The exit finally came into view, and tears stung his eyes with relief. His car was waiting, a silent guardian at the edge of safety. His hand shook as he pulled the keys from his pocket, fumbling with the remote. The lights flashed. He yanked the door open, dove inside, and slammed it shut. For a moment, he thought it was over. The world shrank to the small bubble of the car, his ragged breathing filling the air. He turned the key. The engine roared and he backed out. But as he turned the wheel to drive away, he froze. The man was standing directly in front of his car. He hadn't been there a second earlier. The space had been empty, he was sure of it. But now, there he stood, only feet away, facing him. His hood covered his face, his body completely still, as if he had appeared from the air itself. The runner's breath caught in his throat. He barely saw the figure, clear just the shape, the hood, the unnatural stillness. He did not wait. Slamming his foot on the gas, he whipped the car around the figure, nearly spinning out as his tires screeched against the asphalt. He didn't look back. He didn't want to know if the man had moved again. The drive home was a blur. He ignored stop signs, ran through lights, swerved on turns. None of it mattered compared to the need to get away. When he finally burst through his front door, he locked every window, every door, and sat in the silence of his house, shaking uncontrollably. Sleep never came that night. When it did in the weeks to follow, nightmares carried the man back into his mind. Dreams where the hooded figure followed him endlessly, closer every time, a silent shadow impossible to escape. In some dreams, the man's hood fell back, but the face beneath was twisted, inhuman, something worse than he ever wanted to see. Time passed, and life resumed its rhythm, but he never set foot on the boardwalk at night again. What once was his refuge had been corrupted, replaced with something sinister. The strangest part was not what he saw, but what he couldn't explain. The silence of footsteps, the way the man grew closer without moving, the sudden appearance in front of his car. None of it fit into the logic of reality, and yet all of it happened. He still tells the story with a shiver in his voice, because deep down he knows it wasn't just in his head. Something was there on the boardwalk with him, something that wanted to be seen, something that wanted him to remember. Public restrooms are unsettling places even in daylight. The harsh lighting, the smell of disinfectant that never quite covers the stench, the chipped tiles, the rusted fixtures see everything about them feels neglected. At night though, when the boardwalk is empty and the only sound is the ocean crashing nearby, those same bathrooms transform into something far worse. They become cages, places where the thin line between safety and danger is decided by a lock, a door, and your ability to escape. For one young man, this truth came crashing down on him during what should have been an ordinary, forgettable stop. It was the last night of a summer trip. He and his friends had spent hours on the beach, gathered around a bonfire, laughing, drinking, and soaking in the salt air. By the time the fire had died down, most of the group was exhausted and ready to head back to their rental. He, however, wasn't quite done. He liked walking off the buzz, liked letting the night air cool his body before bed. The boardwalk was quiet, serene in a way he had never experienced before. Every wooden creak under his sneakers reminded him that he was completely alone, until nature called. He wasn't the type to relieve himself in public, no matter how dark it was. When he spotted one of the public restrooms along the boardwalk, he reluctantly headed inside. The door creaked loudly as he pushed it open, the hinges screaming against the silence. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of bleach and something sour that clung to the walls. The dim fluorescent light flickered, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. Still, he chose the farthest stall, hoping to get it over with quickly. That was when he heard it, the door creaking again. Footsteps entered. Slow, deliberate. At first, he thought nothing of it. Someone else, maybe another late-night walker like himself. But the steps didn't head toward a stall. They circled the room, around the sinks, toward the stalls, then away again. The sound was too light to be pacing, too irregular to be casual. He held his breath, waiting for some sound of another stall door closing. It never came. The steps just stopped, somewhere near the sinks, only a few feet away. He decided to finish quickly and leave, but when he pushed on the stall door, it didn't move. The lock turned, but the door held firm. He shoved harder. Still nothing. His stomach tightened with dread. He realized then that the footsteps had been purposeful. Someone was holding the stall door shut. A wave of anger rose in him, trying to cover the fear. He rammed his shoulder against the door, but it refused to budge. Then the footsteps started again. This time they were closer, too close. He swore he felt pressure on the door itself, the faint resistance of someone on the other side. Adrenaline surged. He backed up and threw his full weight against the door. It burst open, flinging him forward. He stumbled into the open bathroom, heart hammering. The sinks, the floor, the stalls empty. The air hung heavy in silence. Then, just as he turned toward the exit, the bathroom door swung shut. Not with a slam, not with a gust of wind. With intention, as though someone had just walked out. Panic clawed at his throat. He rushed to the door and twisted the handle. It wouldn't turn. Not locked in the usual sense, the handle itself felt jammed, like someone had tampered with it. Trapped inside, he spun back toward the stalls. That was when he heard it. Movement. Soft. Subtle. From one of the stalls he had just checked, his blood went cold. He dropped low, looking for feet beneath the partitions. Nothing. Whoever it was, they were standing on the toilet, hiding in plain sight. The walls seemed to close in around him. He thought briefly about calling the police, but his phone was buried in his pocket, and the thought of taking his eyes off the stalls terrified him. Then he remembered the small window above the sinks. High, grimy, barely wide enough for a person. It was his only chance. He scrambled onto the sink, the porcelain groaning under his weight. He pushed the window open and started to climb. His heart pounded so hard, it drowned out the ocean outside. Just as he pulled himself halfway through, the sound erupted, a stall door slamming open. He twisted his head and locked eyes with him. The man standing in the stall was wrong in every way. His skin was pale, almost translucent under the flickering lights, covered in patches of dark, coarse hair. His clothes were wrong too, youthful in style but stretched over a body far older. His face was that of a man in his 50s, maybe older, but his clothing suggested he was trying to imitate someone much younger. The sight of him was so jarring that for a second, the runner froze. Then survival kicked in. He pushed himself the rest of the way through the window, landing hard on the wooden planks outside, scraping his knee against the boards. Pain shot up his leg, but he didn't stop. He ran until his lungs screamed, until the safety of distance felt real. Only then did he stop and call the police. They arrived quickly after all. This was a beach town with its own share of drunks and troublemakers, but when they checked the restroom, the man was gone, vanished. The only evidence left behind were scratches on the door handle, as though someone had been tampering with it. The officers told him he had been smart to get out through the window. They said little else, but the implication was clear. Whoever had been in that bathroom had wanted him to stay locked inside. The next morning, the sun rose, and the boardwalk was once again filled with tourists and locals, oblivious to the nightmare that had unfolded only hours earlier. To everyone else, the bathroom was just another dingy structure near the beach. But to him, it was a cage he had barely escaped. The image of that man in the stall, pale and grinning, would haunt him long after the vacation ended. He left the town the following day, never hearing any follow-up from the police. Part of him suspects there was no investigation at all, and maybe that was worse, because it meant that man was still out there hiding, waiting for the next person to make the mistake of stepping inside. Childhood summers often become golden memories, soft edges in our minds filled with sunlight, laughter, and the sense of endless freedom. But sometimes, even in those most innocent years, something can happen that scars us forever. For one boy, the family trips to his grandparents' beach house were pure joy. Cousins, siblings, and relatives filled the house every summer, creating chaos in the best way. Days were spent playing in the sand, riding bikes through quiet streets, and racing each other up and down the boardwalk. The beach felt like home, safe and familiar, until one night, when curiosity led him into something he would never forget. That summer, a massive hurricane was forecasted. The town had prepared by building enormous sand dunes along the shoreline, walls of sand so tall they blocked the ocean from view. To a child, they were fortresses, towering structures perfect for games of climbing and rolling. At dusk, when the lifeguards went home and the beach technically closed, kids still snuck around. It was a quiet town, a place where children roamed freely, where danger wasn't expected. That evening, after a fight with his brother, the boy slipped out unnoticed through the sliding basement door, barefoot and eager for solitude. The boardwalk was unusually empty, not a single person in sight. The quiet felt wrong, like the entire town was asleep. Then he saw it, a thin wisp of smoke rising from behind one of the sand dunes. At first, he thought it was fog, but the steady curl told a different story. Someone had started a fire. Fires on the beach weren't unheard of. Tourists sometimes lit bonfires despite the rules, but tonight the emptiness magnified the strangeness. Why would anyone light a fire in the middle of a deserted beach? He hesitated, then remembered what his parents had always taught him. Never turn your back on someone who might need help. So he climbed. The sand was soft, clinging to his feet as he scrambled up the dune. From the top, he saw it clearly, a bonfire, isolated, with no chairs, no coolers, no people. Just flames licking upward, casting eerie shadows across the sand. It felt wrong. Fires like that were never left alone. And as he slid down toward it, the feeling deepened. The closer he came, the clearer the smell became, not just wood, but fabric. He approached the fire pit cautiously, and what he saw made his stomach twist. Among the ashes and embers were clothes. Children's clothes. Socks, shirts, small sneakers, half-burned fabric that looked too familiar. His heart pounded as he realized this was no casual fire. Someone had been burning belongings. He crouched, using a stick to stir the charred remains. Then he saw them photographs. Most were blackened, curling into ashes, but one was intact enough to make out a face. A boy, smiling at the camera, around his age. And what made his blood run cold was how much the boy in the photo looked like him. The resemblance was uncanny, as if the picture could have been of a distant cousin or even himself. The stick fell from his hand. Fear gripped him so tightly he could barely move. His child's mind screamed that this was something bad, something he wasn't meant to see. That was when a voice cut through the night. "Hey!" The shout echoed across the sand, sharp and commanding. He spun, and in the distance, a man was approaching. Bald, unsteady, staggering forward with jerky movements. The boy couldn't see his face clearly, but his posture was menacing. His words slurred yet forceful. "Hey kid, don't you go anywhere." The man's voice rose with each step, his pace uneven but urgent. The boy's body froze, locked by terror. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. For a moment he couldn't move. He was just a child, facing something he didn't understand but instinctively knew was dangerous. Finally, instinct broke through. He turned and bolted toward the dune, scrambling upward as the man's footsteps pounded closer. Sand gave way beneath his feet, making every step feel like running in a nightmare. Behind him, the man shouted obscenities, his voice carrying across the empty beach. The boy's small body pushed harder, clawing his way up the wall of sand. Just as he reached the top, a hand closed around his ankle. Fingernails dug into his skin, sharp and desperate. He screamed, thrashing wildly, kicking until the grip slipped. By some miracle, he pulled free and tumbled down the other side of the dune, rolling hard before landing in the sand. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted for the boardwalk. He didn't stop running. His lungs burned, his chest ached, but he ran as though his life depended on it. He looked back only once, just enough to see the man stumbling at the base of the dune, too slow to follow. Relief mixed with terror as he fled through the empty boardwalk streets, the night swallowing him whole. By the time he burst into the house, he was shaking so badly he could hardly breathe. Tears streamed down his face, but he told no one. Fear of punishment for sneaking out overpowered the horror of what had just happened. He locked it inside, convinced that silence was safer. The next morning, the beach looked normal. Families set up umbrellas, children built sandcastles, and adults strolled casually along the boardwalk. There were no police, no signs of a disturbance, no whispers of danger. He said nothing. Years passed, but the memory never left him. The image of that fire, the children's clothes, the charred photographs, the boy's face that looked too much like his own, and the man staggering, bald, reaching for him with those clawing fingers. He never knew what it meant. He never found answers. All he knew was that he had been very close to something evil that night, something that still haunted him into adulthood. And sometimes when he thinks back to the photograph, he wonders if the boy in the picture had once stood where he stood and whether he had been as lucky to escape. The boardwalk is supposed to be a place of joy, a place where families gather, where children laugh over melting ice cream, where the sound of waves blends with carnival rides and summer music. But as these stories reveal, once the crowds are gone, the boardwalk becomes something else entirely. It transforms into a skeleton of wood and shadows, a place where danger hides in the cracks and silence magnifies every step you take. Each of these tales carries the same chilling reminder. Even the most ordinary places can become hunting grounds once darkness falls. The first story teaches us how quickly curiosity can lead us into danger. A simple mistake-dropped key turned into a nightmare beneath the planks, where strangers lurked in the dark. The second story shows us the terror of being watched, of realizing you are never truly alone, and that sometimes the figure you see may not follow the rules of the natural world. The third story forces us to confront the vulnerability of being trapped, where a locked door becomes a death sentence, and a face in the wrong place at the wrong time can mark you forever. And the final story reminds us that children, too, are not exempt from fear, and that sometimes what we stumble upon is far darker than our young minds can comprehend. What ties these experiences together is not just fear, but the way they linger. None of these encounters ended with clean resolutions. There were no arrests, no answers, no reassurance that the threats were gone. Instead, each person was left with scars that never healed, questions that were never answered, and the knowledge that danger had been closer than they realized. That is what makes these stories truly horrifying. They don't end. they stay with you. They live in your memory, in your nightmares, in the places you once felt safe but no longer do. So what should we take from them? The lesson is not to live in fear, but to live with awareness. To understand that darkness changes familiar places. To remember that being cautious can mean the difference between safety and tragedy. If you ever find yourself alone in a place that feels wrong, trust your instincts. Turn back. Walk away. Lock your doors. Carry your phone. And never assume you are completely alone. Because as these stories show us, the boardwalk is never truly empty. Someone might be watching. Someone might be waiting. And if tonight's story sent a chill down your spine, then remember there is always a price for fear. You've just paid yours by listening. For more true tales that will leave you questioning the shadows around you, subscribe to The Price Paid. Because here, every story is a reminder of the cost of survival, and every view comes with a warning. The horrors you hear are real, and they could happen to anyone, even you.